My name is Gwen Waswa from ICT Authority, and I'll just talk briefly about the Smart Academy. Now, as you are aware, those of you who may not also be aware, Ministry of Information, Communication, and Digital Economy has for a long time invested in infrastructure. You can see across, we have the fiber, we have the public Wi-Fi, we have the constituency innovation hubs. All those are being done by the ministry. ICT Authority is a state corporation under the Ministry of Information, Communication, and the Digital Economy. So the authority is an implementer of all the ICT projects within government and also those that are citizen facing. And to that note, after doing all that infrastructure, time has come when we need now to have the uptake of technology. The more reason right now, we have a document called the Kenya Digital Master Plan. The Kenya Digital Master Plan, if you Google, I'll just type it here, you'll find that this is a document that can be used by anyone, not just by the ministry or the authority. This document is a blueprint of what the country needs to do in the next 10 years. So it is called the Kenya Digital Master Plan. In this master plan, you will realize that we are supposed to train 20 million Kenyans in a period of 5 years. And these are some of the initiatives that we are putting in place. So we are talking about training 20 million citizens, training 350,000 public servants, training 300,000 teachers, training 10,000 professionals. Those are now who will delve deeper into ICT issues. But the others, we just talk about the digital skills. Now, for the entire population, the authority has two categories of trainings. The first one is paid for. You have to incur a cost. That one, we have a curriculum and we have a consortium. We have a curriculum for foundation digital skills, which costs 500 shillings, and you train for 2 days. And we also have a curriculum for basic, which costs 2,500, and you train for 10 or 5 days, depending on the number of hours you are taking per day. Why are we costing those two particular digital skills? You may ask yourself. We are trying to open up digital jobs for the youth. Imagine a situation where we have 20 million registered and they have paid for the digital skills, the foundation or the basic. We will require so many digital teachers to undertake that particular training for us to complete the 20 million. So that money that is being paid is not being paid to the authority for consumption. It plows back to those who will be training and also the institutions that will have signed up with our consortium. The institutions that will have signed up with our consortium for the training. So we encourage all of you, your institutions, feel free to reach out to the authority. If you are a training institution and you're certified by NITA or any other certifying institution, feel free to reach out to the authority so that you are part of the people undertaking the training for the 20 million. That way your institution will earn revenue as well as impact on the youth and also increase the growth of digital jobs. So that is the first one. The second one, we are talking about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity right now we have rolled out to all citizens in the country, and this cybersecurity is at no cost from your side. But this other side, there is a cost. So encourage everyone who is outside there to take advantage of this cybersecurity training that is being offered during these holidays. So the cybersecurity awareness training is, you are doing it at no cost. Upon completion of attending the class and completion of all the 3 days, you will have to undergo an assessment to gauge your understanding before you proceed to get your certificate. The certificate will be downloaded online once you pass the assessment. So we encourage all of you to attend all the 3 days for you to qualify for the assessment and the certificate. If you attend 1 or 2 days, you may not be able to do that because we are also calling for commitment and imparting this knowledge. It's not just about the certificate. So with those very many remarks, I wish to thank you all. Thank Capabuil. They are going to be your trainer for the next 3 days. Feel free to join. Encourage your colleagues, even those who have not joined today, they can join tomorrow and complete another session in the course of next week. We also have some videos we can also share with you to just enhance the knowledge you will have gained today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for supporting us, and feel free to visit www.smartacademy.go.ke. I'm just writing the site on the wall so that you are able to visit. And just before I forget, we also have youth opportunities when you visit the Smart Academy. Explore. Under training, you will find we have the Presidential Digital Talent Program. I'll also be sharing the link here, where we onboard 400 interns every year countrywide. That is an internship program where we provide a platform for young graduates to learn and identify and explore their potential for employability. We give them a platform to network, a platform to connect. We do not guarantee jobs, but we pay them a stipend of 25,000 shillings during that 1 year, and we encourage them to identify opportunities and fly. Another one we talk about is Ajira. Ajira Digital is for online jobs. Also, it is on the platform www.smartacademy.go.ke. Explore and see what we have. The last one, we have the white box. White box is where we encourage anyone with an innovation. Feel free to submit it. You will either be connected to someone to support, either you will get some training, or you'll be told to rework on it, or if it's viable, it may attract funding and also impact to the country of Kenya. So thank you very much for your time. And that is it for now, and bye. I'm sharing the websites on the wall right away, and back to you, Simon. Okay, Simon, maybe let me introduce the trainer. Our trainer today is Mr. Cephas Okoth Mwana, and Cephas is a data protection consultant, trainer, as well as a privacy technologist with over 6 years of industry work across cybersecurity, cloud, and GRC. Cephas assists organizations navigate strategic, operational, and technical privacy matters, from privacy program development, reviews and assessment, implementation, and operational technology and tooling, monitoring and maintaining, auditing, and reporting. He has served organizations across banking, insurance, aviation, nonprofit, technology, and other verticals by advising on and executing privacy, governance, and operations. He bears credentials in data privacy, operations, GRC, cloud and security, including OneTrust, GDPR, AWS, CSA, and many more, and is a member of the ISOC Kenya and Data Privacy and Governance Society of Kenya. So I now, before I hand over to Cephas Okot, I'll now hand over back to Simon, who will then introduce Cephas. Thank you, Simon. Simon, are you there?
Hi, Gwen. Sorry, I lost you. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Did you get what I was saying?
I lost you a bit.
At what point?
You are talking about Cephas?
Okay.
Yes.
I had just introduced Cephas, but maybe you can proceed and introduce him again.
Oh, that's fine. I think due to time contingencies, I know the attendees are waiting. So I will like to just hand over the mic to Cephas. Cephas, are you set?
Yes, Simon, I can hear you. Hope you can hear me loud and clear.
You're perfect on my end. I can hear you perfect. Are you able to share your screen?
Yes, I'm doing that in a bit. So yes, I'll be sharing the slides. So thanks so much, Mike. Thanks so much, Gwen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the bit of a bio intro there. But all in all, I'm here to talk about cybersecurity a lot more today than data protection and the other aspects of the bio. I'm excited for this one. Of course, I've done a couple of things with ICT before as well and Capabuil, and this will be a great addition to that. So first things first, there could be, I know the audience is a bit broad, general and dynamic. So if this is something new to you or something you are starting to learn and all that, we welcome you to new learning. And at the same time, if you are a bit more familiar with some of the fundamentals of cybersecurity and related IT and other aspects, we welcome you again for a refresher. And feel free to also chime in your opinions and comments in the chat section, and use the Q&A to potentially poke some discussion questions or probe questions that can not only help you, but potentially the rest of the audience here in today. So with that, I'd like to just give a quick overview of what you're going to cover through the next 3 days. So one, we're going to look at generally what is cybersecurity and of course why it matters. It's important to start with the what and why fundamentally. We look at the cyber threat landscape, just an overview, a snapshot of some key things. And then later on, that is today, we'll do that today. Tomorrow, we could cover some critical key components of why cybersecurity matters within the public sector, and maybe some specific public sector nuances and issues, coupled with emerging technology concerns, favorite being the AI wave and conversation that is happening now, but of course would extend that into a few others, including the good old cloud, good old blockchain, good old zero trust, and probably a couple others. And then thereafter, we'll just have a snapshot of what the future could look like in terms of public sector cybersecurity. And of course, by extension, just generally cybersecurity. There are a few issues of interest there. Then on day 3 and the last day, we would now have a deep dive, well, more or less like a light deep dive into data protection and privacy, which I think is also a critical emerging area in ecosystem. And there's a lot of conversation and movement around that. And some of you can, of course, be interested in that and hopefully pick that up also as a career line of interest. So with that, let me share my screen so that we can kick this off. Share my screen. There you go. Screen share. Great. I think Zoom has really changed since the last time I used it, so I'm trying to figure out how to to navigate. They've done a bit of updates and all that, but I think I've got it. So please do confirm you can see my screen. Just give me a thumbs up. If you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Give me a yes in the chat. Just let me do anything to let me that you know that you can see my screen. I see a yes, 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 yes. Okay. Super. Well, I think it is safe to assume that a lot of us are able to see the screen. So in case you can't, just I think let the panelists or the moderators know, and hopefully we can help you out. Great. So I hope not to take more than an hour, maybe 15 of your time. So let's see how this goes. So our goal here is to talk about cybersecurity broadly, but also shed some light or put some spotlight on the field within or the domain within the public sector. Of course, private sector, where most of us work, has different nuances from the public sector, really. But we hope that we'll address a bit of both. So I have moved to the next slide, just so you can confirm that my slides are moving. Quick overview, what cybersecurity really is in a nutshell. Cybersecurity is just about protection. It's all about protecting, your systems, your networks, hardware, software. It could be data, but generally any asset of interest that you have within an organization, within an entity, those assets needs to be protected. And protection, of course, assets, the nature of assets or the type of assets would differ. So you'd have physical assets, things like hardware, doors, desks. You would have logical assets or non-tangible assets, let's call them that way. It could be data, that is stored within your laptop, your servers. It could be files, both in physical and soft form. So all of these things could be assets, and they come in different forms and nature. So that will then call for sort of different subdomains of cybersecurity. So typically you'll find cybersecurity not only covering ICT related issues or ICT related assets, but that by extension could delve into even physical security, where of course we have our kawaida security guards or security officers who are supposed to do manning of the building and systems and hardware and infrastructure and all of that. Then of course you want now to consider maybe networks and consider even people. People protection is critical. You need to protect people as an asset and things like that. So different nature of assets might require different nature of protection, which cybersecurity in a broad sense would cover both all of these areas in both physical and non-tangible aspects. Of course, in public sector, government is a huge, is the biggest organization really in any country. So government has potentially has the most data, the most infrastructure, the most services being offered by government, has the most people involved in terms of employment and all of that. So government has a lot of these assets, which requires, of course, very scalable, very broad cybersecurity protections. And of course, here three critical ones are typically data. So government runs on data, whether it's people data, whether it's transaction data, or any other intelligence and information and all that is needed. Critical infrastructure powers the work of government, which includes, of course, the public services that we consume, the utilities, all of these agencies that serve the public, which is the greatest consumer in any nation. So data and critical infrastructure, very important assets in terms of public sector assets. So this matters because protection in protection on cybersecurity in public sector matters. Because we know that there's a lot of data, yes, but then we can consider this part of this data to be sensitive. We can consider part of this data to be personal, as we say in data protection. We can consider some of this data to be critical intelligence data, and so forth and so forth. So there's this range and the broad spectrum of data that government collects and processes that needs protection, in whatever from whatever front, in whatever nature, in whatever format. Also, the government, of course, has, like I say, the biggest systems, especially critical systems, whether it's the water systems, the power systems that we use, KPLC, for example, and the related infrastructural agencies, whether it's the ICT infrastructures that we use, at the center of which for us, of course, is eCitizen, which is the central, carries more than 5,000 services. That's a huge centralized service, ICT service. So all of this has to be protected. So because at the end of the day, for lack, or rather, if we have insecurities of whatever nature, as we shall see down the road, there can be ripple effect in terms of the effects, not only of those particular assets, but across the social economic spectrum, including national security. For example, if eCitizen is down even for a bit of time, there are social and economic effects to that. But at the same time, there could be implications of national security, based, of course, on the nature of it could be a breach, could be an attack, or it could be anything that is causing compromise. So again, there are all these other government installations that also could fall under national security interests. Out there in the wild, as we call it in security, there are a lot of threats, there are a lot of attacks that are happening. And this covers both the public and the private sector. And public sector is definitely a bit more vulnerable because of some of the challenges we shall look at in a bit. Because we know there could be constraints in terms of investment and how much we deal with protection in the public sector. But generally, there are so many threats and attacks, and some are as old as we can remember, but they keep evolving, they keep coming back. Some of the old attacks are still causing havoc even right now, because somehow we people never learn, or at least we never improve our systems as fast as some of these threats and the hackers and the attackers are changing their techniques and tactics. So there's a lot more sophistication in terms of the people who could cause havoc to the public sector infrastructure. There's a change in the techniques and the smartness and ingenuity of these people, and then of course. So some of the adversaries we see these days, they're really having to focus on e-government infrastructure, because they know where in those e-government systems, that's where a lot of governments are sort of centralizing or consolidating some of their assets in terms of data, in terms of service they want to deliver, and all of that. Digital IDs are new recent sort of investment that our governments, particularly in Africa, are trying to implement, and generally the global South. And so that becomes, again, a critical target area in terms of some of the rising threats that we see in the wild. But generally, these are so-called top drivers of why really we need cybersecurity in public sector, and of course generally as well. And talking of threats and attacks, fundamentally, we always have to discuss the threat landscape. And again, this is very dynamic. The landscape of cyber attacks changes every minute, every second, every hour, right? But as much as things are changing, a lot of things are still remaining the same. And many times we still talk about the same types of attacks and threats. For example, malware and ransomware. These are things we've been hearing for a decade plus, right? But they're still the same. I mean, we could have different forms of malware created by different hacker groups or different threat threat actors and all of that. But they are still malware. They are still ransomware, right? So in a sense, malware really generally is here just to disrupt, government operation of an organization. It could be in the form of worms. It could be in the form of advanced viruses, etc. So essentially, they're just here to cause chaos, right? On the version again, now the fashion of the malware now is where we have ransomware. And ransomware, as the name suggests, it's a combination of malware and ransom. So we have a malware that requires you to pay some ransom, for you to be able to address also or find a solution to the malware. So ransomware typically it will be deployed and it will encrypt data within your organization or within some target systems. And once those particular data sets are encrypted, you would typically be asked to pay some form of ransomware in the form of money. This money could be typically it's the virtual money, right? You're told to send 10,000 ETH coins, right? Or you're told to pay 1,000 Bitcoins, to a particular Bitcoin wallet and all of that. So again, if you get to a point where you're being asked for a ransom, because you then can't access your data and then you then can't continue with your business as a department or a ministry because your data has been encrypted and you can't figure out a way to get the encryption key and do the decryption. There's the bargain of whether you should pay a ransom and facilitate the activities of the hackers, or you refuse to pay the ransom and potentially look for other recovery ways like deploying your backups, right, or doing some recoveries to the last point of backing up and things like that. So these two are very critical issues, and as we can see, for example, here, a report by the national SAT gave these statistics that is for January to March 2024 in terms of the malware trends in Kenya. We see that we have about 33 million, 187, etc. Threats which are detected under the category of malware, right? You can see 33 million. That is not small. That is not small amount of malware activity. And then, of course, we have here, of course, 1.1 million, which are more or less like the advisories that they issues to the various threats that they saw. Again, you can see here, I've just put this snapshot here to help us understand that this is a widespread issue. So this is Kenya. If you look at South Africa, for example, last year in June, one of their big banks was hit with a ransomware attack, which was not very pretty for them. We also had their defense department, which were also attacked with ransomware. And these are two big institutions that whose, of course, if business operations in those departments are compromised, then we probably would have a slowdown in terms of transactions, in terms of would have probably inhibition in terms of security intelligence and security work and all that. So again, we have Kenya Airports Authority locally here, which last year it was also hit by a ransomware called Medusa. They were able to sort of contain it, but again, that's just an indication that any public institution can be a target of this, and this can always come through any ordinary employee by performing an action, or depending on the vector, this can be realized within the organization. So common target, generally, we are looking at critical information infrastructure. So for those members here who particularly work in critical infrastructure, mini MDAs, I think is something you have to be aware of, because one of the key vectors or key methods used to deliver some of these things is phishing, and phishing can target anyone really within the organization, right? Whether it's a virtual exercise or a physical sort of social engineering thing, all of these are possible attacks. One good one to note is web application. All of us use the web every day for life. I mean, we use the websites every day. So web application attack is definitely a major one. And as you can see, majority of attacks targeted at government systems, the ICT sector, which relies a lot on ICT systems and web portals and interfaces. and integrations and all of that. So ICT sector is within government, of course, and other government systems are critical targets. Typically, you'd find that attackers would go for try figure out login credentials, and they could, again, as I've said, use phishing methods where you really just deceive members of that MD or members of the department to either give you credentials willingly or fill out credential in a certain malicious form, and then that credentials are sort of farmed, and then they're used for attacks. It could be vulnerable web browsers. Some of us don't update our web browsers. Most of us are guilty for this. We don't get to update softwares, applications, browsers, and all of that. And as if you're using old versions, then those versions typically would have a weakness or two that might be taken advantage of. And then, of course, databases where a lot of government data would be would definitely be a target, because data is the new oil, as many people say, or and it is too valuable for the attackers. So again, this is just an impression that, hey, websites are critical avenues for attacks. And there are a lot of different versions or different ways you could actually have web attacks. A bit of mitigations. Some of these we could do by ourselves individually. For example, in your website, you always need to check whether you have that on the top right, just right on the left, on the left of your browser. And just next to where the link is, the URL is, you need to check if you have that green padlock there that can indicate you have some web security. Right now we're using TLS. So as you see here, we're talking about disabling SSL because it's a bit of an old protocol. So we need to update those protocols. Something we can do with the most new updates would have this already built in. We need to sort of push products that are out of use to their end of life, retire them, and then of course apply patches and updates as I've mentioned. Again, some of these things we need to do individually, even for our own personal reasons, our own personal laptops, personal gadgets at home, can do some of these updates and patches. For example, Microsoft normally have patches every other Tuesday, so you can potentially, if you're interested, you could potentially look out for those patches. Mobile. So mobile, all of us have a gadget on our tables, on our desks right now, in our pockets, etc. So mobile attack is definitely very ubiquitous. And of course, we see majority of attacks are targeted to individual users. Here we're talking about individual users, or by extension, individual devices, right? So those devices, whether it's and particularly those devices that are set up within the organization, but we all know that we also bring our own personal devices to work and potentially use them for work activities. So those are definitely targets for mobile threats. And as you can see, also we have Android TVs. After all, a lot of devices right now, even in our homes, are smart, and we intentionally go for smart devices. So those will typically carry some sort of operating systems and applications and all that. So those could still be targets in this case. And then of course, malware is definitely a good way that attackers use to sort of compromise mobile devices, mobile applications in these devices. So how can we deal with this? A couple of things to do here. So we need to use applications that have been trusted and verified, particularly from the application stores. I think it's safe to say that we shouldn't be downloading the .apks from anywhere and then install them and all that. And the one notorious one is WhatsApp. The WhatsApp GBs and the rest that are not legitimately developed and provided by the Meta or Facebook company. So those ones will be tricky. Could be a door into your kingdom. We need to always look at our permissions, especially for applications that we download. Which permissions do they ask for? Which permissions do we give them? I know sometimes we download because we want to use, and because we want to use, we are willing to give all sorts of permission. But maybe we need to take a moment to think before we click, to think before we give those permissions. Maybe just to read what those permissions are, right? Or maybe even further, go to your settings, your mobile settings, go to the permissions, look at the application. Look at which permissions you've given to each application. You might be surprised at some of the things that that you see there. For example, a calculator asking you for permissions to use your mobile camera. Does it really make sense? Or the Bible application, right? Bible.com application asks you for permission to ask you for permission, for example, to make calls, right? I mean, how are you going to make calls with the Bible application? Some of these small things are really the easiest way for attackers to get into our systems and all that. So again, keep everything up to date as much as possible. That should help. But put in essentials, really. These are just essentials that are important, I think, for all of us. Call them cyber hygiene. So what you're talking about is some things you can use just for general cyber hygiene or security hygiene that is good for you personally, by extension, your workplace, and by extension, your family, and by extension, generally all of us. Systems attacks are very notorious, and this is where really the big game is. And by big game is, I mean, some of the largest attacks are here, and because they really target critical infrastructure, critical information infrastructure. So from, as I mentioned earlier, from our water and sewerage systems to our power and lighting systems to our critical manufacturing sectors, to our transaction systems, like, for example, e-Citizen, which is a big one. So all of these are critical infrastructure sector. Of course, right now we have some private companies that really fall under critical infrastructure, and our green company on Wayaki Way is one of those. It's a critical infrastructure company. So this then means that systems attacks are very high risk, and of course attackers would typically target databases, which, again, data is everything. Data is an asset, is a product that is sold in the Silk Roads, in the dark web. And the common data that is you typically find in the dark web would be, your credit card information, your potentially addresses, home address, depending on what has been collected. Of course, it could still be your emails for sending spams or sending those phishing emails and all that. All of this, still, if it has value, be sure that it can be sold or it can be bought. So operating systems, you have infrastructure. This infrastructure here, of course, could even be the physical systems itself, right? For example, you go to let me give a case of, I don't know if we have Kengen folks here, but if Kengen systems, because they're using operational technologies, right? And right now, potentially, they've adopted IoT in there, and then they've potentially upgraded, and now they're probably using smart OTs. So all of these things can be impacted from a system level, right? And remember, they're critical systems, so that again can have a lot of socioeconomic, including national security effects. So yeah, attackers definitely look out for weaknesses. Again, the idea is always that why would I want to go and knock down the vault of a bank if I can clearly just ask the nice lady or the nice man at the reception to give me the key to go and open it and walk right in and take money, right? Why should I be carry hammers and everything else to go knock it down? So at the end of the day, attackers will always be looking for weaknesses and the easiest way in into these systems. And one of the easiest ways is really people. It's all of us, right? It's all of us. So they will you typically be deceived in some form or shape. You would typically be asked nicely or be charmed into giving some information. you would typically be told to do something that you think is really innocent, but in the back end is really malicious. Then that can lead to things like, having your credential, being acquired by these bad people, and then they can easily just walk into whatever systems or accounts that they need to. Because right now we see, as I mentioned, a lot of IoT being adopted in all sorts of places, and particularly in critical infrastructure. And some of these devices, fundamentally, they're insecure even at hardware level, right? Even at hardware level. So then that becomes sort of a way in for the hackers and the attackers. So system attack is as I've mentioned, is where really the big game is from a critical infrastructure perspective. And just some tricky things here to note. Again, updates and patches, they never go away. The same things we've been singing for over 10, 20, whatever years, over decades still apply right now. Strong passwords, strong credentials. I'm sure you probably heard this before. Same things we talk about, and then of course for those who are probably a bit more technical, you would want to talk about hardening your systems, particularly at even if at code level, at application level, at hardware level, network level, etc. So all those levels, you might explore how to sort of harden. And then, of course, hardening might also be include potentially adopting, security in layers. So you have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So you keep adding many, many gates before you actually get to where the asset is, right? So it's important to be able to note that. So I see let me just check the comments. Okay. All right. I thought there are some questions, but it's okay. Good. So one thing to highlight, because you're talking about government and the nation and public sector, is nation-state attacks. So these are definitely interesting ones, because anyway, we see them every other time, and right now we see a lot of these particularly in the war zones, and the nations that are in disagreement or some form of conflict. So nation state attacks here is really one nation attacking the other, or conducting cyber attacks on another nation, right? Typically, these would target, again, critical government services, critical government systems, because the idea here is to cause the ultimate ultimate harm in terms of the scope of the effect. So if I'm able to attack a system and be able to shut down electricity for 40 million people, that makes more sense. Putting my investment as a nation in terms of the people and the skill and all of that. So the ultimate goal is always to cause all the harm possible to the people, to the nation, or to the government in that particular target nation. And here, of course, one example, there's this SolarWinds attack that happened a couple of years ago. So this is definitely one for the books. I had to sort of list it here. Of course, the idea that it is alleged that the Russian intelligence unit was the one that performed attack on a U.S. government on a U.S. company, which then, of course, led to a lot of U.S. government agencies having system failures and shutdowns and all of that. So again, that was a very big attack. You can potentially Google and just read out on this particular case. It's definitely a model case to look at. But closer to home, I think you can see here we have Africa serves as a testing card for nation states cyber warfare. This is very true. Has been happening for a while, where we see a lot of the advanced nations doing testing on some of our systems, or even so using our systems to attack other nations, right? So we are sort of caught in the middle of this, a war between one advanced nation to another. And one good common example for this is normally what we call a botnet. So a nation would attack, for example, 10,000 systems in Kenya, have remote control of those systems, enroll those systems to what we call a botnet. So botnet essentially means that those systems would be treated as zombies, all right, by these people, who treated by zombies, or bots rather. And they'll be used, particularly when their performance is high, they'll be used to as part of a huge network of other computers. They'll be used to perform attacks on other nations. Again, we've seen this happening. Digital infrastructure. So there's this Kenya. So there was a case, of course, last year of the anonymous Sudan. I think we also saw that here and there, where some websites were being defaced. I think there was probably a case of ransomware being ransomware or some ransom being asked from an activism perspective. But we do know that yes, it was targeted a lot on the public sector systems. We have this thing of we have this one where one nation was accused of sort of attacking our systems locally here, trying to gather or fish for intelligence around our economics and financial issues. Again, all these are just headlines, which will tell you really these things are real and they're happening within our own departments, within our own ministries, within our own agencies we are in. And then, of course, one interesting one that I like to mention is Egypt. Hackers, attacking Ethiopian sites because of the Nile Dam conflict that has been going on for a couple of years now. Again, this is a real one, and it's definitely one to watch. So these are real. This is happening, and we who are within the public sector, I think, should be aware of these things, so that one day when you wake up and you find our ministry, our department, our agency, or wherever we are, the headlines, we should be able to relate to it and potentially understand the possibility of these things happening. Supply chain is an important one, because all of us are either suppliers or we are consumers of supplied services or products or goods. So at the end of the day, this supply chain can be compromised at any point in time. It could be that your supplier has been compromised, and because of that, you get compromised, right? It could. So here we are talking about maybe ICT. ICT is using a cloud vendor. If that cloud vendor is compromised, then ICT could definitely be compromised, both from a data perspective and just business, shutting down really, probably they can't do business, that's then becomes an effect of that supply chain attack. And of course, I've already mentioned SolarWinds, which was in particular a supply chain attack where one of the SolarWinds. SolarWinds is a software government or intelligence software provider, and so they were attacked. And in that case, of course, government and other big private corporations could not were then impacted by that particular attack. So again, that shows you if there's a weaknesses or vulnerability within your vendors or supply chain, that will ultimately have effect downstream. We have a case where within the security sector, there's a this is not in Kenya, but I just want to give a general description of what happened. So there's a company who had been contracted by the police department to provide police IDs. So here we're talking about smart IDs, right? So that particular company, that particular supplier was a target. They were attacked, and because of that, of course, information of police officers was partly released to the public. And so part of that information could be the name of the officers, their home address, which department, which units, which areas are they deployed to, including, there was a threat of information about undercover officers being exposed, and the effect of what that could lead to, right? Or informants being exposed and things like that. So again, these are real issues with real life impacts, because if information of those officers are exposed, then we all can imagine what could happen, from a criminal targeting perspective. So yeah, you can check out the SolarWinds case, also up on Microsoft, which is two of our favorite companies. I've also experienced some of these supply chain attacks, and there's always a lot to read on these things, and just again to appreciate and understand that no company, no agency, no ministry is an island. As long as we are using other people's products, goods, and services, we are then exposed if those suppliers are exposed, and that is why then it is important as good governance to have some formal third-party risk governance, right? So this could include all sorts of due diligences, all sorts of third-party risks assessments, all sorts of assurance activities from and to your suppliers, and particularly from your suppliers, so that you understand their security and privacy posture, and then that can always be reviewed over time regularly, just to ensure assurance onwards. I already talked about phishing. Just something to highlight is that phishing, or maybe let me just give a brief explainer. I did mention that phishing is typically where there's some form of deception being used by bad actors to fish for information. That hence the name phishing, right? So some deception is used, some cheating is used to fish for information from a target, and the target here could include any of us. And I tell you for sure, no matter how much experience you have in whether intelligence or cybersecurity or whatever form of security you practice in, we all have weaknesses, and those particular usual weaknesses of we being humans is what is being used by some of these bad actors to fish for information, right? So one big one is always social engineering. So social engineering, as the name suggests, is really someone coming on and trying to engineer you socially. And engineer here is what we now call trying to find the weaknesses, leverage those weaknesses in a very social, welcoming, hospitable way. Very social way to get information that they need. And of course, we've seen a lot of employees, staff members, including even third parties, who reveal information, whether it's passwords, whether it's emails, whether it's information about someone else that could then lead to a compromise of systems or the organization. So that is very, very common, and all of us are really susceptible to this. So we need to be careful. Gov employees definitely target of this one. Typically, I know there's quite some laxity in terms of security issues within the public sector, which needs to be enhanced. So that then provides a lot of room and confidence for bad actors to really target Gov employees. And I think a lot of cultural enhancements also we need to consider in terms of preventing this could be socio-technical sort of nature of attacks. So again, there are many types of phishing. I wouldn't go through it all, but just as a quick explainer, you could have phishing through the phone, where someone just calls you and tells you this and that and gives you stories and asks you for information, what we typically would call scamming, right? Scammer calls you and tries to get information. It could be phishing through email, what we call email phishing, as you can see here, where you receive an email that tells you, oh, I'm the Prince of Bermuda, and I'm trying to move to Kenya. I want to move money. Moving 10 million, it has gone to the wrong account, so help me do this and that. Give me your ID number, etc. Right? Yeah, I think we all have seen a bit of that. So there's another one called spear phishing. So spear phishing is really where we are targeting very specific individuals, right? So this typically is people of interest in particular sections of the department. So the idea is, if you take a spear, you're not taking a spear to target 10 things at the same time. It's only one thing, right? So we really want to have a very specific target, go for that target in whatever format or method we'd use. But we have a very specific target that we want because there's a certain level of access, or there's a certain level of there's a certain type of information we need. Yeah. We have something called welling. Welling, this is where you really go for the big boys. Of course, big boys would always have most of information because they have visibility, access across the organization, and information about systems, intelligence, financials, people, etc. So welling is where we target the top level of any organization. So it could be the CEO, the CFO, the entire C-suite, could be board members, and such type of individuals. So these are the ones we call wells. So these wells, if you target them using phishing attack, we call that welling. And then one notorious one is business email compromise. So again, this is where you get those emails. And then you probably click a link here and there. Sometimes the email, you find cases where I really want to get emails, for example, of ICT, and how do I do it? I get one legitimate email, I look at the format, I go online. There are tools that can give me, once I have the format, there are tools that can, I can really just run and get all probably 10,000 emails of ICTS staff members, and potentially use those for email targeting or phishing targeting and all that. So again, all of these can happen at any point in time. So some are more common than others, but all of them really have the phishing nature to them. Because all of us are part of these organizations and MDAs that you're talking about, the public sector, we are all insiders in some form or shape. By insiders, we mean we work there. We have some level of access to whatever assets that are within that organization, right? But then it could be that at some point we make errors, we make mistakes, and those mistakes cost the organization in terms of a breach or an attack happening, right? Which can lead maybe to loss of money, loss of reputation, loss of jobs, maybe for some people, etc. So that then leads us to think about insider threats, which could be any of us. These insider threats, they're typically more or less like 5, 6, but 3 common ones here would look at is one, you can have in the middle here, as you can see, you can just have an employee who is careless, as I've mentioned, make mistakes, make errors, and these errors could lead to breaches and attacks, right? That essentially means that attack has not come from outside, it has come from inside. So it's an inside sort of sourced attack. And so we have this careless users category as one of the insider threats. We have these compromised users. So of course, this is where you find an employee is very innocent. They have no idea that they have been compromised. And we see this a lot, of course, in phishing, where people will just click a link, download something, a file, a document, or go visit a certain web page, website, etc. Very innocently, right? They do not know that they've been compromised, but then their actions or inactions then leads to a particular threat actually being realized, right? Then one notorious one is these malicious users, malicious insiders. So this could be your colleague, this could be you, this could be anyone in the organization who has a malicious intent. And they usually, of course, have access, some form of, like I said, all of us have some form of access. So based, of course, on your level of access, you might then very intentionally, very knowingly, perform certain activities that can lead to a threat being realized, can lead to an attack. And we've seen a lot of malicious insider threats that involve exfiltrating data. So, you know, someone just downloads a whole database of customers and decides that I'm taking this copy of the database home, you know, as insurance, for whatever reasons, or decides just to cease to steal, you know, download some emails because they have access, and decides to potentially move those to, you know, send those email copies to a different, maybe a competitor even, right? You know, so this is very intentional. No, and as you can see, we typically would have, we call them disgruntled employees. There's always a motivation. There's always a reason why people do such things, right? Especially the malicious, intentional users. So they could be very disgruntled because maybe of the politics in the organization, or certain decisions or other issues that can be made. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there's always the accidental activities that also do happen, right? So yeah, this insider threat is definitely one, what do we call it? Is a persistent threat. It's there with us every day because trust has been placed on all of us as staff members. But then at some point, if we then take advantage and misuse that trust that the company has placed on us, it might be very hard to detect. Even with systems and processes, might be hard to detect such things. Might be hard to address them early on. That's why you hear sometimes, and especially, for example, in banks, you hear that someone has been collecting money from the bank for 5 years, and the bank had no idea, right? Because they were collecting 1 shilling every other day or whatever, or 5 cents per transaction. You know, it's only realized 5 or 3 years later. So it might be sometimes hard to detect some of this, but this is the reality of the threats that are within organizations. Yeah, so that's generally just some highlights on some of the threat issues, the attack outlook of within the cybersecurity, what you see in the wild, what has been there for years, and is still valid, is still active. As I'd mentioned before, things keep changing and improving, but at the same time, a lot of things just sort of remain the same. But it's good to be able to either know these things or at least refresh ourselves on some of these issues. So let me just quickly check in the chat. I think we are not. What time? We should be. We are not far from finishing. Let me just quickly scan the chat on the Q&A. Okay. Someone says my computer is infested with ransomware. It has been extension. Format the PC. Okay. Okay. How can an organization preempt, protect itself from phishing attacks? Are there systems to monitor such? Well, there are vendors who are providing some solutions for phishing, social engineering, human factor security issues. Of course, one common one is not before. I am not selling for them. That's a disclaimer, but they're definitely leading the market on that front. Might be good to check them out, see what their offering is like. But one thing I know for sure as a caveat is that it's not a perfect art in any way, because a lot of these phishing, social engineering, generally human factors, cybersecurity issues, a lot of have a lot of human and cultural dynamics to them, which these tools really do not really capture the core of these socio-technical concerns. There are dynamics such as education, like what you're doing today, which is a lot of us do. We educate, we do awareness sessions within our organizations and all of that, but we still get a lot of phishing, incidents and events. There are issues of attitude. It's really hard to change someone's attitude, even if you educate them. That does not guarantee that their attitudes towards security would change, or their attitude towards some certain actions would change, right? You know, there could be issues around norms, right? Just our own kawaida norms as a people, as a society, as Kenyans, right? Normally we say Kenyans, we are last minute people. So if something is urgent, we are very willing to do whatever it takes to get it done. So if you're hit with an email that tells your CEO has said you need to transfer 10,000 urgently, because of this and that, and your finance person, to what level are you going to verify that that request is actually legitimate before you actually trust it and be able to do the action? So again, there are certain norms, there are certain attitudes, and there are other dynamics that are really just at the core of we as humans that might be difficult to address with a tech solution. So at the end of the day, and then also we do a very poor job in terms of deploying metrics that can help to understand how bad or how well we are doing in terms of dealing with human factors, in cybersecurity. So that means it's hard to measure, and because it's hard to measure and we cannot measure, find it difficult, then we might not effectively address some of these things, right? So again, there are all these dynamics around security culture issues that might really go unaddressed. How effective is the asset software in terms of phishing? Well, I don't think I should address that here. Talking about that specific vendor per se. Okay, let me see. I think I've So someone asked, what is SSL? Okay, interesting. So SSL is a secure socket layer. So right now, it's a protocol that has been used for web security for a very long time, to ensure that there's what I'll call a foundational level of security for web browsers, right? So every time you're visiting websites on your favorite web browser, as I mentioned, if you see that green lock on the top left of the screen, right next to where the website link is, that typically is a security feature that an SSL can help you have. Right now, we're using what we call TLS. TLS is sort of the new kid in the block. Has been there for a bit, of course, but it's has more capability now. And so whenever you do updates for your web browsers, typically you would get TLS set up within your web browsers. Maybe one last one, if there's any. So what can we overcome ransomware issues since our ICT isn't equipped to mitigate? So I said I just format the PC. Okay. Yes, that is now the issue. Ransomware is hard to deal with, to be honest. Normally we say, well, at least let me use the famous phrase that the US government uses: we don't negotiate with terrorists, right? So if in a case of a ransomware, it would be a case of a balance between we do not negotiate with hackers, so we are not going to pay, or you decide, okay, fine, we are going to pay, which is not recommended, because if you pay them, then you're facilitating their operations beyond your own, beyond the attack or the ransomware that is targeted to your organization, right? So you're funding them, so that's why it's encouraged not to pay. But again, recovering from ransomware is tricky business. It's tricky business. So formatting could work, but then you've seen ransomware where you really can't format. If you format, it sort of regenerates, because again, it's the deployment nature of the malware is such that it's very core to your system. So even if you format the top level, then you really still can't access. You really can't use your systems. But again, that's a discussion to really explore. But ransomware is generally tricky to deal with. Okay, so let me see if we can proceed so that we don't take too much time. So yeah, just some highlight on what I think is unique. And I think, well, anyway, this is not what I think really. It's just general truth about what is unique within the public sector cyber. Legacy systems, a lot of governments are still using a lot of dated systems, dated softwares, though I know we've seen a lot of improvements over the last 5, 6, 7 years, especially in our local ecosystem. But governments are notorious for legacy systems, so outdated in IT infrastructure, which of course the challenge with this is they're hard to protect. Of course, some of them you might say, okay, fine. There's the concept of air gapping where probably they're not very internet exposed. But I think in the spirit of e-government, and we see a lot of services going online, we definitely need to be looking to for more modern systems. So more modern systems then provide the opportunity for, by default, they come with some level of essential modern security, with the capability for the updates and the patches and the upgrades, integrations included, because integrations, you could really integrate security softwares as well, which provides extra security capability. So legacy systems don't lack that ability for integrations. A lot of them lack the extensive capability for integrations for security, and generally they're it's just hard, can't update them, so it becomes difficult. Budget constraints. Yes, the government is not in the business of cybersecurity, and neither is any company, unless you probably are offering cybersecurity as a service, right? As a consulting firm. But business objectives are different. So typically would put money and investment where to our core business objectives. Then cybersecurity and the other compliance things would typically come in as supporting organizations, right? So yeah, in that sense, there's always budget constraints for security, privacy, and related. And so this limited funding then, really limits how much technology, how much human capital we can acquire, how much we can integrate within our systems, within organizations to serve security, right? So I think that is something we all face, and it's not just security. HR will tell you there's budget constraints. Finance will tell you there's budget constraints. So money is short. So we have to sort of work with what we have. That's definitely a challenge there. Oh, one case about legacy systems, if we can just go back a step, is the WannaCry ransomware. I think this is something that was made a lot of noise back in 2017, 2018. It was very where we saw Microsoft Windows. I think that was Windows 7 and below, because they were very old versions, and the Microsoft had stopped issuing updates and upgrades for those particular versions of the operating systems. The WannaCry ransomware, took advantages of systems and pushed run and caused havoc across the world. As you can see, we are talking about 200,000 computers across 150 countries. So organizations that were using Microsoft Windows, Windows 7 and below, they definitely were target victims for this attack. That was, again, quite difficult to deal with at that time, because first it's ransomware, and then of course there are other technical considerations. But again, that just tells you that legacy systems are really just weaknesses within your IT environment, and change or upgrades to newer systems is a good solution. We have a regulatory environment that is quite dynamic, that is changing. And so we see governments adopting, for example, different acts and bills around critical infrastructure. Now we have data protection and privacy. We have the new cyber regulations, for example. So all of these things definitely provide challenging an environment, because compliance is compliance. You're either compliant or not. And so in the spirit of regulation, if government really wants to sort of comply to these acts and laws, then that becomes a challenge to be able to balance these different changing regulatory demands. And some people say cybersecurity and data protection are mutually exclusive, in the sense that you can't have cybersecurity and have data protection at the same time, or you can't achieve your business objectives and at the same time achieve cybersecurity and data protection. That's not quite true, really. In fact, cybersecurity and data protection can really help you achieve your business goal. Can be business enablers. I think that's the idea, really. To use cybersecurity as business enabler, and but both security and privacy are really mutually really work together. So there's no data protection without cybersecurity, and there's no there could be security without data protection, but there's no data protection without cybersecurity. So it's important to know that these two are fundamentally important to each other, and so they're not mutually exclusive, and that's something to really consider. Talent is definitely an issue. We all have had I call this a tired topic. We've had this talent shortage, talent mismatch, and others for many years. But again, is it really a question of shortage of talent, or is it a question of other things related to how we acquire talent, right? So we know the private sector definitely absorbs a lot of the top talent because of the perks that are involved. Can't say the same with the public sector because of the lower perks that are involved. But then there is talent in the market. And so based on your needs and demands, it's really just an issue of finding the right fit and potentially considering alternative pipelines, of acquiring some of this cyber talent. Some of the mainstream pipelines, the mainstream pipeline as you know it might be a bit limited. So looking elsewhere could be an interesting opportunity. And you've seen in some other places programs like what the Smart Academy is doing, where it's really building the skills in the non-traditional format, outside the academic, outside the school system. So we have these very targeted boot camps, very targeted academies, very targeted skill building, programs that really churn out some potential talent that can fit some of these talent gaps, of course, when given the opportunity and an attractive, what could be an attractive package. So again, these are just unique challenges, but generally, there's definitely a lot of work in the public sector, and a lot of learning as well to be done, both from and to the public sector. Both from on the private sector. So public sector can learn a bunch of things from the private sector, in terms of governance, security management, implementation, compliance, and related. But I think for us here today, because this is we have a general audience, and we all want to be conscious and aware about these issues. I think it's important to appreciate that within our own various agencies and where we are within government, or even beyond, it's important to appreciate that firstly, security is important. We all should know that, maybe even as a sixth sense. And then next, also to just appreciate that and every day, every minute, every hour, there are all these different types of threats. There are all these different types of attacks that are happening. And so having some insights of them and at the very basic level, what can me as an individual do is important. And then broadly at the same time also appreciate within our own marketplace, or within our own workspaces, and in this case the public sector in general. What does security look like? What are the challenges? What are the issues, as we've discussed? So that was the purpose of today's session. Tomorrow we hope will dive a bit more deeper into some of the more a bit more technical, a bit more managerial, a bit more strategic, a bit more technical aspects, and then also look onwards. What could the near to midterm future look like for cyber within the public space, and then thereafter, hopefully, we naturally will dive into compliance and data protection, which is a very interesting area as well. So with that, let me check just have a quick scan of the chat. Requesting for presentation. Okay, with regards to malware, with regards to the malware threat, how secured is cold wallet for those involved in blockchain technology? Interesting. I'm not a blockchain security expert per se, but I do know cold storage for wallet and your digital assets is definitely a level up in terms of the privacy by default nature for blockchain, right? And maybe that's a conversation we can have out of this platform. I do have a card solution for sort of this, but again, I'm not promoting myself, but again, exploring card solutions might be an interesting way to look at this blockchain. How can malware be leveraged to compromise end user devices? How can malware be leveraged to compromise end user devices? Okay, so malware for end user devices. Well, like I said, there are many different forms of malware, right? And depending on the nature on the nature of the malware, that will then inform the device. So device, let's say here, I think in India you probably are talking of, maybe you can look at mobile, right? The mobile devices instead of probably enterprise ones. So hello, Simon, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Good. Something happened to it's outside, so a lot of interesting things. Anyway, where was I? Trying to look for the question. Oh yeah, so malware. Yeah, so I think yeah, so malware can definitely be used, can be targeted to the device, but I'll consider more about the applications within the device, right? Applications within the device, unlike ransomware, which really locks the device, works at sort of the what do we call it? The hardware level. You'd really want to look at malware that is deployed to the applications within those devices, right? What I see? Wow. Okay. Now I am lost. See a lot of yes. Well, I just select randomly. So, what are the major companies offering security for websites? Oh, there are a bunch of them. I mean, if you just Google web security service providers, you will see a bunch of them, including, I think some has been mentioned here, like ESET. Again, I'm trying to avoid mentioning vendors' names, but ESET, Microsoft, and others would really give you some, security solutions, Trend Micro, etc., etc. So a bunch of these vendors would have would it's what I'll call like platform security as a platform. What I mean here is yeah, you would find suite of solutions instead of just one solution. So web security tools will probably just be one of a suite that well, you can still purchase individually, but it will be one of a suite of tools that you might want to consider. Boy. Okay. Simon, I think I am done. Some parts of us. Okay, okay. All right, someone, I think I don't know if Simon is in the room. I think he's probably not around. Okay. So I think I'll just take a few more questions and then so standalone systems that integrate. Okay. Allow me to switch my video. So sorry guys, I'm just trying to navigate these tabs here. So here, okay, ransomware benefits the perpetrators with some gain, could be financial, Etsy. What do malware benefit the perpetrators? Okay, so there are multiple motivations for why hackers do what they do. Of course, financial is always top one. Money is the greatest motivation, right? Depending on the context, depending on the malware deployed, it could just be to cause disruption. Some malwares could be used for DDoS, disruption of service. Some malware could be used, what do you call them? What's the word? System failure, system shutdown, right? Just to break things down, right? So really depends, and sometimes it could be that, if one system is shut down, then they actually make money. For example, think of I wouldn't want to say a competitor, but think of a target. In fact, let me bring it to the nation state, right? So I know there was a case where, I can't remember the countries, but there's a case where one country attacked another country, brought down some systems, so that a third country who is an ally of that attacker country could benefit from some financial economic, could get some financial economic benefit. So again, context. If the context allow, then financials will still be something of benefit, really. Nation states are operated by governments, criminal elements within those jurisdictions, like Egypt, Ethiopia case on faltered talks. Are they perpetrated by governments or criminal elements? That's a good question. Sometimes it's government, and it is known it's government, but then governments will typically hire the bad guys to do their dirty work for them, so that there's plausible deniability on the government part. So yeah, like Russia is notorious for these, of course. South Korea, we know is government. We always know South Korea is government, but Russia, might hire, a hacker group to do their dirty work for them. So it really probably would depend. Do you think it would be better for government and private agencies to have some interface, in their systems? There is talk of the carrier banks, telcos interfacing, and them being exposed to multiple points of failure. digital transformation is here. We have to do what we have to do, and big part of DX would then be integrations or interfacing. That goes without saying. If you want, for example, we are talking a lot about public infrastructure. We're talking a lot about digital ID. These things have to interface at some point, right? For example, one model country is Estonia. So Estonia has all these robust, highly scaled public infrastructure systems, right? And they're all interfaced, because that's the only way you're going to probably share information. You're going to bring in efficiency and effectiveness in terms of to the customers, to the users, to the citizens, right? So that if I go to KRA, I don't have to go to my telco, I don't have to go to my bank. I mean, really depending on the use, but it goes without saying. We have to have integration. The question is how we're doing it. Yeah, for me, I always say our biggest challenge is how we implement things, not so much why we need them. Digital ideas are great, they're awesome, they're great, but how are we doing it? It's always the question. Multiple point of failure as well. Even if you have one interface, say one central point of failure, for example, and this is just hypothetical, so that I'm not taken out of record. For example, e-citizen, could we consider it as a single point of failure? And would we rather have multiple points of failures or single points of failures? That's a conversation that has been had. But we know there's the business efficiencies, there's a accessibility that it brings, etc. There's the business benefits to it, right? So again, we cannot run away from the needs of digital transformation, of integrations and interfacing. How we do it, I think, in my opinion, really should justify, maybe I didn't get this, but how does compliance with data privacy and regulation interfere with cybersecurity? Good question. So some people say that cybersecurity and data protections cannot coexist, but it just fundamentally doesn't make sense. I did mention that data protection and privacy exists on top of security. So you cannot have data protection without security. But of course, you still can have security, and we've always had cybersecurity without really considering data protection in the way in which we are doing now. But I'd like to bring in something a bit more. So cybersecurity typically has three objectives, which you call the CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Data protection has 6 objectives, right? Typically has 6 core objectives. So there are 3 extra objectives on top of the CIA, which is already covered by security. So you can see security is fundamentally part of data privacy and protection. I think for the other 3, those are privacy specific objectives. Okay. So for standalone systems that are on-premise, best advice on security features, again, it should depend on the system, should depend on your deployment. Yeah. Any insight notes about data privacy and security? I've just mentioned that, Eric. Both have the CIA object, but privacy has 3 more extra privacy specific objectives. Israel practice to excel in cybersecurity. I would advise you to go to YouTube, look out for some nice Israeli cybersecurity documentaries. If you were able to go through 3 or 5 documentaries, I think you would really clearly see why they do it. But generally, one core thing about them is that a lot of their cybersecurity capability has been built actually from the public sector, and specifically from security agencies. So they really invested a lot in building skills and capability through their security and military agencies. So a lot of ex-military, ex-security agencies, ex-intelligence personnel really came back to the private sector and got investment incentives, and they're able to build startups, cybersecurity startups that a lot of them have gone global, and hence why they they are really known in terms of cybersecurity stuff. I see we have some guys who've raised a hand. Let's see. Caroline Kiragu, I don't know if you want to talk. Let me allow you to talk if you can. Carol? Okay. So I think we can stop in the next 3 minutes. That's okay. Maybe you can get one person to speak. Hillary. Okay. All right, great. So I think we can give it a rest. Thanks so much, guys. It's been a pleasure to I see one interesting one here. Let me just see. How effective is 2FA? Well, MFA has weaknesses, for sure. MFA has weaknesses. That of course includes the 2FA. So Henry, just to let you know, it's not a perfect security control as we speak, but it's essential. It's essential. Okay. Asanteni sana. Thanks, guys. I hope to join you again tomorrow. Though tomorrow you'll also be having a different trainer who will lead the session, but I'll be there. And then hopefully I will touch base with you guys on Thursday, where I will take you guys through data privacy and protection compliance. And I look forward to tomorrow on Thursday. Asanteni sana and have a fantastic evening.